National Health Service not fit for purpose. NHS doomed from the beginning. Can't cope, won't cope. NHS, the bottleneck of society. Welcome to the 9:45 o'clock news with me, Yeltrah Nehpets. Shit, forgot my hat. The headlines again. The National Health Service is not fit for purpose. NHS doomed from the beginning. Can't cope, won't cope. NHS, the bottleneck of society. And this applies to all national health services all around the world. Because they're shit. Basically. It's not the people, the poor brainwashed servants for the NHS. It's not their fault. And it probably isn't the fault of the designers, although we could speculate on that a bit. Right. The NHS was founded in 1948, and they expected to cure the nation. This was the idea. We have a national health service. People can go for free and get things that will help them, and they'll be better. And then we won't really need it anymore. That was the idea. But has that been the reality? No. It's been a long-awaited crisis to happen. But we've had the warning signs. In 2005, the MRSA crisis began and has not been solved. These superbugs, which can evolve to defeat the cleaning regimes of hospitals even. The problem is, you're bringing all the sick people into one place. Same with the doctor's waiting room. Where's the worst place to go if you're ill? Is to go and sit in a waiting room with a bunch of other people who have possibly other problems. Much better the system they had before. You had a healer or a midwife who would go and visit the people in their home. When you're sick, what's the last thing you want to do? Have to get up and go out somewhere. You know, you should be in your home. And we've had the antibiotics crisis. This is a crisis. Basically, antibiotics have been the answer to every ill there has been pretty much for a while. Let's face it, people you know, something's wrong with them. They're on a course of antibiotics. And it's gone crazy. And they're not going to work anymore. And this is the crisis. The crisis is depending on this system for the nation's health. It's the wrong way to go. To rely on a few experts who maybe come up with a miracle drug that makes the pharmaceutical companies a lot of money. We'll get onto them again in a bit later. But better to give people the knowledge, the power to heal themselves, to know what they should do when they get a virus, when they get a bug, to maintain their health. Not just tell them a balanced diet. They hear a balanced diet and they don't hear the message in that. When they say a balanced diet, they're talking a wide variety of foods. Fresh foods, cooked foods, foods with histamines, foods with enzymes. You're talking a wide variety of things to enable your body to do all it needs to do. So yes, a balanced diet is true, but let's go more into depth and tell people what each thing does, because every food does something. It has an effect. Positive side effects, and if taken too much, negative side effects. And that's the thing with your pills. So you come up with this pill that you make from God knows what, and you find out it's good for this, but yeah, there'll be a side effect. So you take this other pill. And that's the problem people have when they go into the NHS. They become dependent on it. Not really through a fault of their own, but because they're stuck with it. You can't get these pills from anywhere else. You don't recognise the ingredients in pills. You can't make these pills. So not only can't you make them, but they're not as good as the natural product that they probably copied it from, using their synthetic manufacturing techniques. And now they're into your genetics. Now they want to mess with your genetics. Medicine, technology. You don't want to mess with that. You don't want to let them start injecting you with stuff. God knows what they're planning to do with you. Eradicate you. And now we're in the virus crisis. Let's just take a little break here from my rant. And let's see what's going on. Is it still working? It seems to be working. It's complaining about my video resolution. That's okay. And there's only one concurrent viewer, and that's probably the web bot. So I'm just going to go on with my rant here, because, you know, I have thought about this. I have got something to say about this, you know. Just do this here and we'll get straight on with it. And we might in a few minutes go over and listen to what they're squawking about on the 10 o'clock news. But this is the 9:45 o'clock news. You can Google that if you spell it exactly how I've done, and you can find it. So you can just tell people, Google the 9:45 o'clock news. Right, let's talk about the history of the virus. The virus is an evolving organism. It's almost like a species, you know? And it's kind of one that's come to keep us in check. Because the virus begins with when you start to get a lot of people in close proximity. That is when the virus has been able to get a foothold. So back in the first places, where probably smallpox was one of the original viruses, and because they had it in ancient Egypt and things like that. So, you know, this virus has been around, and it is this virus. It's a virus. It's a type of organism, and it's here to keep us in check. It has no other purpose. But just like bacteria, there are millions of good viruses, and the vast majority of them are being found in the sea. There's millions. You take a little teaspoon of water in the sea, and there'll be millions of viruses in there, and most of them are good for you. Gargle with that when you get a sore throat. If I lived near the sea, I'd have a jar of seawater about. But as it is, I don't. And I'm wondering if sea salt maybe preserves some of these viruses. That I don't know either. So the virus has been there continually. And smallpox was around for so long, and it was you could say it was doing its job. You know, and they say it was the first one that humans eradicated, but we didn't really eradicate it. We just found out that if you got cowpox first, you wouldn't get smallpox. So they eventually, when they knew this, they gave everybody cowpox, and then smallpox kind of went away. Now maybe smallpox had a purpose, and that by removing smallpox, we've opened ourselves up to some other problem, some other ailment. Now, polio is an interesting one, because I do believe that polio first existed in America after the Americans did all those wicked things to the natives there. And now that they've pretty much vaccinated against polio, we all have this sugar cube, we're all sort of immune to it by now. Has it manifested differently in MS? And it's very interesting, people with MS have often had some sort of virus flu, and it's the after effects of it. Now, we say flu a lot, we use the word flu for many things, but before flu, it was the common cold. And it was the common cold that killed the South Americans. I am 95% believe that what I'm saying now is correct, right? That the flu didn't come about until the Spanish flu in the early 1900s. So we'd had the common cold for long before that. And it was the common cold that killed everyone in South America, because we were on like version 20 of it, and our bodies from Europe had been used to this and had developed immunity against it. So each time a new version of the cold came out, we managed to pretty much handle it. But when we brought this over to South America with the Spanish going over there, it just basically killed them, because they had had no practice in taking it on. So their immune system just didn't know what to do with it, and it killed them. So that was the cold, right? So as we go through a few hundred years later, the cold is barely anything. It's just a sniffly nose, not feeling too great, all bunged up, whatever. But so a new one comes along, a new virus. Basically, the cold has run out of steam, and along comes the flu, and the first time that it comes round, it kills. It's killer, a real killer. But now 100 years on, after the flu isn't such a killer anymore. You can get a bad case of the flu, and you can be in bed for 5 days, and if you're old, it could knock you out. Eventually, one of these winters, it's probably going to be a flu that finishes you. Okay, and now we've got a new one, and they're calling it corona. So it's still a virus. It's still a virus. They're viruses. Our body has been combating viruses, as we've just gone through, for thousands of years. It's what it does, right? And sometimes it takes people out. And it could well be that it is a survival of the fittest thing. That too much inbreeding certainly weakens you against these attacks. It is certainly the inbred who are at risk from this, because they don't have a second copy of a different gene to tackle it. The body can't. One of the body's defenses is if the virus has attacked one side of things, it can switch to the other gene that it got from the other parent and tackle the virus that way. But if the copies that you've got are both the same because your mum and dad were slightly closely related, and maybe they didn't get together in love, maybe it was an arranged marriage, and that makes your body vulnerable, but it is just your body. As you can look at my meditation videos, go a bit deeper into those sorts of things. So, the idea of having hospitals and experts in the field, and it was a good idea, but history has proved it's not working out. Right? The way we can have a healthy nation is to empower people with knowledge and use the natural resources that we've got. In this country, we grow great milk thistles. The seed of the milk thistle is the only thing that can regenerate your liver and put a barrier around it to protect it. Milk thistle seeds are the only thing that does it so well, specifically. Dandelion roots are brilliant for kidneys. In fact, the roots, the leaves, and the petals, they can all be used. And the seeds as well. If you wait for the seeds, dandelion seeds can be used. We've just got these things that grow. So we should be using what we've got, empowering people with the knowledge that they're amazing beings and they can heal themselves. And if you work with your immune system rather than seeing it as your enemy, which is what we do seem to do a lot, we can have a much healthier nation and let people marry each other for love. Let them find love. Don't look for a partner that, for the wrong reasons. I did in this society, in a sense. We're looking for something and we think we can find it by marrying a certain type of person, marrying the wrong people for the wrong reasons. I know that I've gone off a bit. I always like to look at the cause. The cause is the thing. Alright. So, let's stick the news on here. See what they're saying. We'll go for Radio 4.
3 months, as long as they keep staff on. No British government has ever done that before. Businesses will also be able to put off passing £30 billion of VAT money to the government, boosting their cash flow immediately. And for those who do lose their jobs, benefits will rise by more than £20 per week.
Moments before the Chancellor spoke at Downing Street, the Prime Minister announced tougher measures to combat the spread of the virus. He said the government was now telling, not advising, all venues where people came together to socialise.
I'm telling.
Tonight. Our political correspondent...
They're telling you. Stay in your bloody house.
Pubs, cafes and restaurants everywhere in the UK have been told to shut as soon as possible tonight and not to open tomorrow. The order also applies to nightclubs, gyms, theatres and cinemas. Mr Johnson pleaded with members of the public not to go out tonight for a final time before the closures kicked in. For now, the government is not saying how long these measures will last, but Mr Johnson said the clampdown would be reviewed every month. There had been some criticism before today that the government's advice had been unclear, with people continuing to go out despite advice not to. But today, the Prime Minister said if people complied, thousands of lives would be saved and the country would recover faster.
Scientists advising the government have said social distancing measures will need to be in place for most of a year to prevent hospitals being overwhelmed by coronavirus patients. They suggest alternating strict isolation with periods of less stringent measures. The publication of their advice came as the number of people known to have died with the virus in the UK rose by 40 to 177. More from our science correspondent James Gallagher.
We're in this for the long haul. The science that has informed government strategy shows we can expect disruption to our lives for around 12 months. More than half that time is expected to involve strict measures similar to those in place now. This won't all be at once. Instead, the heavy restrictions will come and go in order to manage the number of cases. The aim is to prevent one massive spike in infections that would completely overwhelm intensive care.
Yes, it's the National Health Service that they're having to protect.
Smaller, manageable peaks. It should save lives, but the cost is widespread disruption to society for some time to come.
They would have been much better off just informing people of
to heed warnings about the
what to do when you get something. I got a breathing exercise.
Reports that young people in many countries were being complacent because older people...
I know a thing or two about breathing. If you feel like your nose is starting to block up, your sinuses are starting to block up, before it blocks up, you can clear it really quick, right? All you have to do is breathe in through your nose, so that you still can, right? Fill up your lungs, and then out through your mouth. Try it now. You'll feel it clear and go clearer. In through your nose, out through your mouth. So much clearer, in fact. If you keep doing it, it gets to the point where it almost hurts, it's so clear, right? And another one you can do is just breathe really gently through your nose. Say if you were to breathe really hard through your nose, it would sort of block a bit. You go like that, yeah? Right, so if you just do it really, really gently, like, and you can almost barely feel it, but you can just feel it sort of filling up your lungs gradually, right? And as long as you're not out of breath when you start this, you can like just keep going until you've filled up your lungs, and then breathe out as normal. And it's a nice way to breathe. You can get into a really relaxed breathing thing. And I think a lot of the issues with this coronavirus is, people worried about shortness of breath, and then you get a bit panicky. You think you're not getting enough breath into your lungs. What happens when most people, what would happen if they let that panic continue is they would faint. And they would faint and they would go unconscious. And when they were unconscious, they would breathe just normal and gently. And they'd be fine. So, a lot of this is just being calm, not being afraid of nothing, because you haven't got anything to be afraid of. So, yeah, that was my little speech.
Yesterday, President Trump suggested that chloroquine could be effective in the fight against the virus. The Nigerian government says there's no proof of that.
Thank you, Jim. You're listening to The World Tonight with me, Chris Morris.
Alright, shut up. So that is interesting what they just said in the headlines there, how they intend to have this. So right at the moment, we're not allowed to go to the pub and all that. We're not allowed to socialise. And then maybe in a week or so, they'll go, okay, now people can go out a bit more. Because, it wasn't that long ago when they were telling us to carry on with our days, right? Just wash your hands, but, be vigilant, but carry on as normal, in a sense. And then they're saying, don't, right? So okay, so they're quashing this peak because they can't handle it in the hospitals. But you see, every time they do this, they make people more fearful that this is a really bad thing. And I was listening to LBC last night, quite late. You had that, I think it might be a popular clip, but you had this doctor who was saying about his nurses. And everything he said was absolutely right. They are risking their lives, in a sense, and they are working their butts off. And he felt really ashamed that people were just carrying on, ignoring the government's advice and going out and basically putting this national health system that we've got at risk. And basically the people working for it, all the pressure's going on them. And that's absolutely fair enough. But the way he described what was going on in there, it's like, oh, it's horrific, and then somebody else phoned up afterwards and said how he'd been coughing up blood when he had this. Now, that's the first time I've heard that. Someone say that they're coughing up blood. When you start coughing up blood, that most people would worry about that. I would worry about that. I don't think I've ever coughed up blood. So, coughing up blood, I would definitely worry. So, yeah. It was quite concerning, and then suddenly thinking, right, shit, is this going to be really fucking bad? Because of the way they're going on about it. And then just sort of in the last hour or so, there's somebody else on ABC talking about this virus, saying it's quite a weak virus. And that's what I was thinking earlier, this is a weak virus. We were lucky with this one. This could have been a heck of a lot worse. I mean, the bad thing about this virus is its long incubation period and its long period where you don't display any symptoms. But then, it's not nowhere near as bad as Ebola or anything like that, right? So in a sense, we're quite lucky with this one. This is a version of coronavirus, right? The corona family, that we're building immunity to because we've only had 2 outbreaks of it before. So in a sense, this is certainly one that we should allow to affect us and get through it, because we're going to build immunity to it, and then soon coronaviruses aren't going to be that worrying anymore. So yeah, if they're going to let us out again, because I don't think we should try and... Because it seemed to me at one point they were like, no, right, everyone stay in now. That's going to be it until September. We're all going to be on lockdown. And, have to face the virus again in the autumn or next year. So it's good that... I think they've got a good method for taking this on. And I just think, forget vaccinations. Just forget about it. Just start looking at the people who did succumb to this and die, right? If there were young people who got this really bad and died, have a look at them. And when you build up your statistics and you've got plenty of them to look at, you can see if there's any patterns. That's the way you should be doing this. Gain more knowledge. I'm infuriated about cancer, the way we deal with cancer. It's barbaric. I've said plenty about that before. But it is. When my dad got cancer, they didn't ask him any questions about, his history. Well, they asked him one question. Have you ever smoked in your life? Yes, he had, but he'd given up 5 years before. But there was no more investigation. None at all. It was just shit. Let's get you on the chemo as soon as possible. My dad was fine when he started that. He was happy, he was healthy. He didn't know anything was wrong. It just was a random checkup and they found something. And 2 years of their treatment and he was a dead man. Yep. I'd sue those motherfuckers. I really would. He would... Once he went up there, I bet he was well pissed off. Even though I really tried to talk to him about alternative methods, he trusted the doctors. He trusted them completely. Wrongly. Right, let's see what they're saying.
And it's only today that we've had this scheme. It took a while to get the actual speech that went with this, a transcript of it, a sign of how last minute it is.
It has to be massive policy on the hoof, doesn't it?
It absolutely has to be, and it does remind me of the financial crisis. People will be working through the weekends, HMRC staff trying to work out how to do this. They'll use the PAYE system, so there's an advantage here in the sense that employers already pay tax through PAYE. So HMRC
see if there's any
and
chat.
customs already know what the wage bills are. And there's a pipeline there across which tax money usually flows, which could be used to make it flow in the other direction. But who will be eligible and how is something that they're still working on. It does apply across all sectors. Any employer in the country will be eligible, but it will be...
Well, I think I got most of it off my chest.
A lot of businesses won't want to touch this. They don't want to have the government paying them.
I was just thinking about doing...
Nice and independent, thank you very much. But those companies who have faced a sudden drop in their income are being told that if they keep their workers, and this is a big if, they have to hang on to their workers, not lay them off, then they'll be entitled to this unprecedented level of support. And also to aid their cash flow, because this will take until the end of April before this money becomes available, they're being allowed to keep the VAT money, £30 billion of it, which otherwise they would have passed on to the government.
And briefly, what are the big things you think, in a couple of sentences, that aren't clear still, that still need to be cleared up as this policy develops?
Well...
Right, this is too boring for words, so that's going off, and I've said everything I wanted to say, so until next time, goodbye, and go well.